Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 115 of The Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. Oftentimes, when I am training on various core correctional skills, whether it is related to risk assessment or the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral interventions, I will frequently use the analogy of being cut off in traffic. I like using this as a, quote, high-risk situation, unquote, as I feel it is one that many of us can relate to. Now, typically I talk about how when presented with the same external stimulus, for example, being cut off in traffic by another driver, we as pro-social individuals react within a range of behaviors that are not as extreme as that of our clients. Again, I like this scenario in that I feel it's one many of us can relate to. Well, along the lines of those more extreme reactions that I referenced, I have asked our good friend, Dr. Jerrod Brown of Concordia University, to come and share his insights with us as to the topic of driver aggression. I am always intrigued when Jerrod joins us on the show, and today's interview does not disappoint. Jerrod is a frequent contributor to this program. If you have not heard any of his past episodes, I encourage you to go back and check those out. Jerrod has talked to us in the past as to a variety of topics, including that of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. He also did a 3-part series on the topic of all things trauma related. Also a fascinating interview on the subject of low self-regulation. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to hear Dr. Brown on this show before, allow me to share a bit as to his background. Jerrod Brown, PhD, is a professor, trainer, researcher, and consultant with multiple years of experience teaching collegiate courses. Jerrod is currently an assistant professor, program director, and lead developer for the Master of Arts degree in Human Services with an emphasis in forensic behavioral health and a second emphasis area in trauma, resilience, and self-care strategies for Concordia University in St. Paul, Minnesota. In addition to that experience, Jerrod has provided consultation services to a number of caregivers, professionals, and organizations pertaining to topics relating to autism spectrum disorder, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, confabulation, suggestibility, trauma and other life adversities, traumatic brain injury, and youth fire setting. Jerrod has also conducted numerous trainings for professional and student audiences. He is founder and CEO of the American Institute for the Advancement of Forensic Studies and editor-in-chief of Forensic Scholars Today. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Jerrod Brown, joining us from the capital city of St. Paul in my home state of Minnesota. And I will see you all on the other side. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Brown. You are becoming a familiar voice with on the podcast, which we appreciate. For those listeners, however, who may be tuning in, so to speak, for the first time to hear you, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, and then we will kick off today's topic around driver aggression and road rage.
You bet. Thank you, my good friend, for having me back. Honored to be here. My name's Jerrod. I am a professor, trainer, consultant, and researcher, and a business owner as well. And I do a lot of work in the area of the criminal justice, forensic mental health field. And today we're going to talk about, a really interesting, complex topic that I think we can all relate to directly or indirectly on some level: driver aggression and road rage. Starting to do a little more work in this area just because I do a lot of work in the area of like self-regulation, impulse control problems, and this topic comes up a lot within that literature. So to give your audience just a broad spectrum overview of maybe why this topic is this important, I really do think it's this important. If we look at just some of the statistics that are out from like the World Health Organization, they indicate around 50 million people suffer non-fatal injuries every year around the world from driving-related accidents. And if we look at worldwide prevalence rates of how many people die annually on the roads, over 1 million people globally die on the roads from some sort of traffic-related accident. Now, some of those are going to be driver aggression, road rage, but not all of them. If we look at specific statistics in the United States, I've come across research that has shown around just a little under 3 million people are injured in the United States on average. I think the statistics really point to the fact that this came out a few years ago, but it's right around 37,000 people too were killed, I believe, in the United States on the road from dangerous driving behavior in 2018. So that's just another reason why I think this topic is really important. Obviously, it has public safety considerations. It has considerations for the criminal justice system and even the mental health arena. So as we start digging into this topic, maybe let's just start with driver stress. We all feel stressed from time to time. What happens if we are stressed before we get into our car? Something happened that morning or whenever. We got in an argument with someone. We didn't sleep well the night before. We need to really be aware of driver-related stress. Basically, think of it as that driver's kind of reduced ability to, maybe it's manage their anger or frustration or even irritation. And they're on the road and maybe someone cuts them off. Those factors in and of itself have the potential to maybe contribute in some cases to driver aggression. We're going to talk about driver aggression today and road rage. What about anxious driving too? There's a whole line of literature on anxious driving. Maybe someone is just predisposed to dealing with a lot of anxiety. Or maybe just someone is dealing with situational anxiety. High levels of anxiety behind the wheel, if you're a driver, that can impact our perception, our thinking, or even our reaction patterns when we're driving down the road. So we need to not only consider our stress level, but also, are we dealing with any anxiety? And I'll talk a little bit about sleep today too, and fatigue, Joe. As we move into like problematic forms of driving, I'm sure we've all done this from time to time. Some problematic types of driving behavior we want to be aware of. Maybe it's a new driver where they lack the skills. Maybe they unintentionally cut someone off. They don't use their blinker to turn properly. Those are all problematic behaviors that could escalate into something more intentionally or unintentionally. Maybe the person has a tendency just to make a lot of driving errors, where maybe they accidentally bump into another car that's parked and they're just kind of spacey and they're not paying a lot of attention. Maybe they're driving down the wrong side of the road and they're new to town and they don't realize it's a one-way, or they have a tendency to disregard speed limits or run red lights. These are all problematic driving behaviors. I'm sure everyone has done this at some point. When we start getting into aggressive driving, and I really see it, this is just my opinion, I really see like aggressive driving and road rage kind of on a spectrum. road rage would be the extreme end of the spectrum where that could result in someone unfortunately dying from road rage. But aggressive driving is kind of a gateway, obviously, into road rage behavior. But aggressive driving could be tailgating someone, just running red lights to like chase after someone because they got cut off. Maybe it's intentionally blocking another car from coming out of like their parking stall, or like changing lanes or something on that. So there's a lot of different things. Maybe someone is an aggressive driver when they become very impatient and the driver ahead of them doesn't realize the light in front of them is green, and they start honking the horn and maybe using gestures that might not be that helpful or productive, or screaming at someone, or flashing their lights, or passing someone on the shoulder. Those are just a few examples of potential aggressive driving behavior. Joe, I'll stop it just for a second if you have any thoughts or questions.
I love that you pointed out that you think of these things, Jerrod, as falling on a spectrum. And again, you've heard enough of these episodes where one of the things I really try to push is to get us out of this sort of binary us versus them thinking when it comes to criminal conduct or criminality. And so again, that's why I love that spectrum imagery, because I can put myself on that spectrum as far as driver aggression. I guess my question is, when it starts to tiptoe to that road rage side of the continuum, what are some factors contributing to that? And do they fall in line with a lot of things that we know, again, from this podcast, looking at things through our R&R lens or through the mental health lens, or stuff that our audience might be familiar with?
I think, yes, all of the above. So let's break it down. So we think of like aggressive driving. Let's look at it through like a behavioral lens. Maybe someone has a proneness to verbal aggression behind the wheel. So verbal aggression, maybe this is a good screening question, just kind of digging deeper into that. Verbal aggression tendencies, maybe they have a tendency to, again, yell or scream or curse at another driver, or maybe it's a pedestrian as well. We can't just think about road rage with another car. It could be road rage or driver aggression with a pedestrian who's walking or jogging, or even someone who is on a bike. So we need to take that into account. Then we have physical aggressive behavior where, again, the person is maybe really showing physical aggressive signs that they are wanting to do harm to another person. Maybe they're using their body language to do that, or they're using their vehicle where they're like driving toward a person walking. I mean, those are extreme examples. Now we have more minor forms of aggressive road behaviors, verbal assaults, tailgating, again, cutting someone off, obscene gestures. I'm sure most people who have driven an automobile have done that themselves at some point, or someone has done it to them at some point. So it's very common, minor forms of driver aggression. Once we get into the road rage component, significant criminal justice and public health concerns. Obviously, we need to think of aggressive driving and how aggressive driving, under the right circumstances, could escalate into full-blown road rage, where that person is just lost it. They're not thinking rationally. I'll talk a little bit about executive function today, and self-control and impulse, and even substance misuse. These are all factors to consider in some cases. Does the person behind the wheel just have a proneness to anger outbursts? What's their history like? Do they have a history of getting in lots of fights? Maybe they have a long history of intimate partner violence or any kind of other aggressive behavior where they just have a proneness to get really, really angry in a short amount of time. What about risk-taking behaviors? That's a whole nother line of things we need to consider. Looking at any history of risk-taking with drugs, alcohol, financial decision-making. Do they bring that risk-taking mindset to the road and behind the wheel? So very important to consider that. Maybe the individual is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Unfortunately, in some cases, we need to consider the fact that there's a small subset of people who engage in road rage where maybe it is resulted in road rage related shooting behaviors as well. Again, it's not common, thankfully, but it does happen in some cases. So we need to take into account those factors. And then it's rare that road rage is triggered by a single incident. There's usually probably a number of other factors going on with that person. It could be mental health. It could be family conflict. It could be medical-based issues. Maybe there's a whole list of factors to take into account. But usually this research literature points to the fact that road rage is not a single incident. There's usually a lot of layers to this, like all problematic behaviors when we're looking at it through like an R&R lens, criminal justice lens, and so on. But when we're thinking of road rage, the definitions are really all over the map, Joe, but really think of it as that driver's kind of intent to, in some cases, it's going to be intimidation. They're doing road rage to intimidate another person for maybe it's a host of reasons. Threatening behaviors. Are they trying to injure someone? Or in rare cases, and it does happen unfortunately in some cases, they're actually trying to kill another pedestrian, a driver, or someone with their vehicle. So again, that's one reason of many why this topic has significant implications, not just for the criminal justice arena and public health, but just the community as a whole. So when we think of like triggering events, Joe, what are some things that could trigger full-blown road rage? Again, maybe the person gets into the vehicle, they've dealt with a lot of stress that morning, they're more amped up, they're more irritated, they're frustrated, they had a really bad night's sleep, they're dealing with a lot of relational conflict, maybe there's some executive functioning impairments going on, they're on the road, what could trigger it? Another car honking at them. Maybe it's another car tailgating them and they're just amped up and they have a hard time thinking rationally. Other things too, maybe someone's yelling and screaming at them or giving them the finger, or someone's driving too fast next to them and putting them in harm's way, and that just triggers them into a full-blown rage. Those are a few different triggering events to take into account. But if you dig deeper into this research literature, and there's actually a lot of studies that have been published on aggressive driving behavior and road rage, traffic congestion has been studied within this context. So if there's a lot of traffic congestion, rush hour, all of that, that could be a factor in some cases. Maybe the person is dealing with a lot of work-related stressors as well. That's been studied within this context. Warm temperatures actually have been studied within this context too, where warm temperatures in conjunction with all of these things could be a factor. Maybe someone is driving in a car and it's 100 degrees outside and their air unit doesn't work either. That's another factor to take into account. This research has also looked at how discourtesy or hostility of another driver can trigger the person for full-blown road rage. And time urgency too. Maybe someone's rushing to get to work on time. They're running behind. And the very nature of driving behind someone who's driving really slow or something like that. These are all factors. Not one of these factors typically explains road rage in and of itself. It's usually, again, a combination of factors that could contribute to physiological dysregulation in that person. Increased heart rates, their breathing becomes more increased. It has a real negative impact on their stress response system. I suspect under a lot of stress, you and I have talked a lot about that HPA axis. I would be shocked to learn that the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, doesn't become dysregulated. And it becomes dysregulated under other forms of stress. Why wouldn't it become dysregulated while we're driving too under a lot of stress? So those are just a few things to take into account. But I can definitely jump a lot deeper into executive dysfunction and some other of those subtopics we've talked so much about in other podcasts.
Jerrod, one of the things that I love about this topic, and frankly, why I got a little excited when you asked about talking about this topic, in particular road rage, is I think it's one of those things that most people can relate to. In fact, whether I'm training on the risk need responsivity model or risk assessment or cognitive behavioral interventions or the cognitive model, I typically find myself using road rage as an example because, again, it's an illustration that most of us can relate to. So whether, again, I'm talking about how perceived costs and rewards of a behavior factor into our decision to act, or you talked about risk taking earlier, or again, that thought behavior link, because again, it's something to say, hey, listen, we all experience that same stimuli, if you will, on the road, but we don't engage in road rage. We don't run that driver off the road. We don't follow that person to the exit and smash their windows in with a baseball bat. Well, why not? What's the nexus there that isn't happening with us? So again, I like it because it's something that we could all relate to versus say, why don't we deal drugs or commit robbery? Because it's there. I'm curious to that end, Jerrod, is there anything in the research, in the literature, or just in your opinion, I've said to myself when I've engaged, sadly, in some of these behaviors on that aforementioned spectrum, that I just wonder if the phenomenon of we're in the safety of our vehicle, there's that sort of protective, figurative insulation or that anonymity, whereas, for example, if I was standing in the bank line and someone performed or exhibited those same behaviors, I wouldn't engage in waiting in line rage or waiting to buy a ticket in the movie theater rage. You see what I'm saying? It's something uniquely about being in the safety of our vehicle that we feel almost more emboldened to engage in behaviors that there's no way I would do this if I was outside of the safety of my vehicle.
I do think there is an element of that, and it's kind of removed from that individual. I do think what you said, why do some of us not engage in that? I really think it goes down to inhibition and self-control and our internal parking brake. We've all got man on the road, but we play the tape through and we can link cause and effect. If we're going to cut someone off, how do we know that person is not going to pull a gun on us or do something terrible? As we get older too, our brains mature. In theory, again, if you're working with some populations, maybe they've had head trauma. Maybe they've just had a lot of adverse childhood experiences and their brain doesn't work properly and they lack self-control. So that's a layer of it. But I do think in the car, I think there's some territorial nature in some cases. I think for some, this is just my theory. If I were to look through kind of like a neuropsychophysiology lens, the body is used to rhythm and flow. So you're in the car, you're driving down the road and it just feels smooth it's nice. And then someone cuts you off. That rhythm is broke up. That has a physiological reaction in your body. You feel more tense. You feel more irritable. Your heart rate changes. Your respiration changes. And I think that is a component of it as well. So rhythm, dysregulation in the body. And then in some cases, you and I did that podcast on alexithymia. There's a few articles. If you dig deep into this literature, you'll find alexithymia just briefly mention that it could be a factor in some of these cases. So let's say you're driving down the road. You have alexithymia where you have a hard time managing emotions, processing emotions, understanding emotions. Someone cuts you off. You get really angry. That emotion goes inward, amplifies in some cases, and then just starts coming out. And it comes out in your driving behavior. You put the pedal to the metal. You're driving faster. You're chasing someone down. I hear stories like this all the time. There is research, direct research, that supports the fact that executive dysfunction is associated with risky driving behavior. So if you are working with a client who has executive dysfunction, and if you work with clients in the mental health arena or criminal justice system, more times than not, the clients you're working with are dealing with some level of executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunction, again, is the boss of the brain, the CEO of the brain. It relates to decision-making, problem-solving, reasoning through a driving lens. If someone is dealing with executive dysfunction, that can have a real negative impact on their cognitive control, just managing their brain, their thinking processes. It can also really impact their way in which how they put on the brakes, so self-control. Impulsivity is absolutely related to this. Lower levels of decision-making and even working memory deficits. Working memories are brain's post-it note. And if we're dealing with executive dysfunction, in some cases, it can lower our coping abilities, so we're less likely to engage in helpful problem solving and coping. Behind the wheel, we may turn to maladaptive coping, where we start yelling and swearing and tailgating someone driving fast, swerving at them. These are worst case scenarios. There's actually some evidence, too, to support the fact, this is quite interesting, drivers with executive dysfunction problems may be less likely to wear their seatbelts compared to people with good executive function. Why is that? Decision-making, strategic planning, linking cause and effect. If I use my seatbelt, that might save my life. They lack that cause and effect. There is some evidence to support that. And there's also some evidence to support the fact that people with lower levels of executive dysfunction may actually be more likely to text while driving and be distracted on their phone or gadgets as well, which is a whole nother can of worms, but another layer that could contribute to some of these things we're talking about.
So if I'm in a vehicle with someone and they're not wearing their seatbelt and they're texting and driving, I'm thinking, well, statistically, they're more likely to engage perhaps in road rage. But all kidding aside, Jerrod, are there formal assessments out there for the human service professional to maybe look at to screen for or, again, give assistance to a client they may have on their caseload to look into this topic?
There are so many out there. Yes, there's tons. There's one called the Propensity for Anger Driving Scale, the PADS. There's another one called the Driver Anger Scale, DAS. There's another one called the Driving Anger Expression Inventory. I mean, these are just three. There's many different ones out there. But if you really want to learn about this topic, share my email with folks. I can send you a long list of different readings. There's actually quite a bit of literature that talks about this within the context of like fatigue and sleep impairment. So I think being aware of fatigue and sleep. There's actually a few studies that have been published on this in relation to emotional intelligence as well. So really being aware of emotional intelligence. Higher levels of emotional intelligence are typically a protective factor. Lower levels of emotional intelligence may contribute to problematic behaviors, not just driving aggression, but other things. But like when we think of the basic components of emotional intelligence, it really relates to our mood and motivation, how adaptable and flexible we are. Emotional intelligence also relates to self-awareness and self-regulation and our interpersonal skills and empathy and cooperation behaviors and regulation of our emotions. So that is one area too to be aware of. Plenty of literature supports the fact that illegal drug use and alcohol problems are another variable you'd want to consider if you're looking through a screening lens for road rage. Maybe becoming familiar with some of the literature on impulsivity and even reactive aggression. And I am aware of a few articles, too, that have looked at road rage within the context of antisocial personality disorder. So people with antisocial personality disorder may, in some cases, be more likely to engage in aggressive driving behaviors. Some evidence supports that fact. And if you're probation corrections, you're working with people with antisocial traits on a regular basis. Very common for long-time repeat offenders who are in prison and on long-term parole probation have some antisocial traits. So those would just be a few other areas I would recommend folks to be aware of. And one other thing too, rumination has actually been studied within this context. So rumination is like problematic thinking. I think we all deal with rumination from time to time. But let's say like anger rumination. That's a real thing. Anger rumination, if someone gets an angry thought stuck in their mind, and let's say someone cut them off while driving, and this person is prone to ruminate, that anger can get stuck in their head and they start thinking about it over and over and over, and it just grows and grows and grows. That could be a possible accelerant in their brain for full-blown road rage as well. And one other thing too, just for your audience and for you to know, Joe, is I'm in the process of actually putting together a training right now that focuses on traumatic brain injury, and it's linked to driving behaviors and aggressive driving. But when is someone with like these brain-based impairments able to drive again? How do you make that decision? There's a ton of research literature out there on head injuries and some of these things we're talking about today. But I want your audience just to know that I'm not saying if someone had a brain injury that means they're going to have road rage. There's a whole host of other factors, but I am going to be digging into that topic and doing a training on that very topic because it does come up enough, and I've been contacted enough by professionals to have consultation on that topic. I thought it's time to put together a training.
Jerrod, my natural follow-up question to the assessment question is, obviously, are there interventions then that can be utilized based on those assessment results? So say a practitioner, either through formal assessment or just through a criminal complaint that their client engaged in road rage, what do we got out there for interventions for the human service practitioner?
I think looking at it through a holistic lens, looking at it through a neurobiopsychosocial lens. So again, let's say it's not just the road rage, take a deep dive. What's their history of irritability like? Poor stress management problems, anger control issues. What's their criminal history like? Their driving history. Is there a head injury? Do they have some executive functioning impairments? If so, maybe working with an executive functioning coach. Is the person dealing with chronic sleep deprivation? Or maybe it's untreated sleep apnea. That's a whole other can of worms we could open up the door right now to. Fix the comorbidities, address the comorbidities. If they're dealing with depression or anxiety or rumination, refer the person to a therapist to address those issues. If they're dealing with sleep issues, has the person ever gone to a sleep specialist to rule out any sleep issues? Maybe the person has a tendency to be conflict avoidant and they have a hard time managing conflict. Teaching them healthy ways of communicating and making better decisions and resolving conflict. Maybe the person is dealing with alexithymia, working with someone who understands that to help the client learn how to process emotions and understand them. Working with someone who can teach self-control and self-regulation. Teaching the client healthy living skills too. Maybe it's going for walks, eating healthy again, helping the client learn how to regulate their mood and their behaviors and their cognition are a few things to consider. And again, we have to do this through a multidisciplinary lens. There's not one professional that can tackle all of those areas.
Jerrod, I love everything I've learned from you and, of course, your outstanding program at Concordia University that we can talk about as well. But everything I've learned from you as to executive function or conversely, executive dysfunction. And just now I heard you use the term executive function coach, and my ears went up. What does that job look like, executive function coach, for our listeners?
I actually completed a micro-credentialing program as a executive function kind of micro-credential. Basically, when you think of coach, think of it as teaching, modeling, role-playing, just skills building. And if you go online and just type in executive functioning coaches, there's all kinds of coaches out there. This is just in my experience. I'm sure there's more out there that I haven't come across. A lot of the executive function coaches work with kids or college students through an academic lens who are struggling in school or homework completion issues, time management, organization. any of you listening here, I think a wonderful business opportunity for you is to set up a company, get the training and skills necessary to be an executive functioning coach for people that become involved in the criminal justice system, people that are really dealing with some of these other problematic behaviors. Maybe it's partnering or consulting with a probation agency. But if we look through an executive functioning lens for intervention, I think you're going to see much better outcomes. I say that because for some of you listening, if you work with clients who have maybe a lower intellectual functioning capability, maybe your client has low levels of executive function, which means in a lot of cases they're going to have abstract reasoning problems as well. And if your client has abstract reasoning problems, they might have greater difficulty understanding how and why questions. And if that person is court ordered to go to treatment, a lot of treatment programs are insight-based therapeutic kind of approaches where it requires the client to have a lot of introspection and self-awareness. Some clients with these issues I'm talking about struggle with introspection and self-awareness. A coaching approach is typically more effective, in my opinion, than insight-based therapeutic approaches for clients with abstract reasoning deficits.
I'd love to follow up with you, Dr. Brown, even offline about that executive function coach micro-credential. I'm just curious how much that process mirrors or has in common with our broader cognitive behavioral therapies.
Well, you and I are doing that article with a few other folks through the R&R lens and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, so I know we're trying to infuse a little bit of that. But if we just look at the criminal justice system, half of people, on average, in prison have a traumatic brain injury. 10 to 23, 24% of people, if we believe what the research says, have FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, probably undiagnosed. A very high percentage of people are dealing with more of attentional self-regulation deficits or other neurocognitive or even sometimes neurobehavioral and neurodevelopmental disorders. Would it be beneficial for all criminal justice professionals to learn about executive function? The answer is absolutely 100% yes. Most of the time, I never speak with absolute confidence. We're always trained as researchers not to do that. 100% of people working in the criminal justice system, regardless if you're a forensic interviewer, a probation officer, a judge, a corrections officer, police officer, if you understood executive function at a deep level, you would absolutely better understand why people do the things they do. Because again, executive functions related to time management, planning, organization, reasoning, decision-making, self-control. The list goes on and on and on. And if you're working with people with brain-based injuries, extensive trauma histories, and if you're working with people with chronic obesity issues, type 2 diabetes, long-term inflammation, chronic pain disorders, there's a huge link between executive dysfunction and many of those clients. Again, it's not going to be 100% of those clients, but if you're wrong, it does not matter because these approaches, I think, are helpful for any person you come into contact with.
Jerrod, I take copious notes during these interviews with you because I fancy myself an adult learner, or lifelong learner, rather. But I won't be so naive to think that my listeners have that same level of investment. So is there one takeaway for the listener on this topic that if they wanted to put into practice something from this episode as to this topic, what would that be?
Well, while we're on the topic of executive function, learn about that. You'll find lots of resources. YouTube has lots of videos. You go to Google Scholar, you'll find thousands and thousands of studies on that. I'm not saying all those studies are related to criminal justice, but there's a lot of articles on executive function and substance misuse, violent behavior, sexual offending, homicide, child abuse. The list goes on. So if you learned about executive function, seeked out more training, consultation, education, you could use those skills not only with working with people with aggressive driving behaviors or road rage, but you could use that in sex offender treatment. You could use that working with DUI offenders. You could use that working with high-risk violent offenders. You could use that working with serious and persistent mental health issues, addiction treatment. It's universal. It's a human thing. We all have it. Some capacities work better than others. So that's where I would leave it, is executive function. Can't go wrong there.
Speaking of training and education, perfect segue, and I alluded to this earlier. Why don't you give a promo to the outstanding program you've put together at Concordia University around trauma, resilience, and self-care strategies?
You bet. My good friend and I, Janina Schick, put the program together, and it has launched. We have a few cohorts going now. It's a Master of Arts degree in Human Services with an emphasis in trauma, resilience, and self-care strategies. It's a multidisciplinary program. What I mean by that is we have students in there from multiple fields of study: probation, mental health, social service, human service, education. It's online. The graduate certificate component of the program is the first 5 classes. So some people just sign up to take the graduate certificate. Each class is 3 credits. Each class is 8 weeks long. And we take a deep dive into really all avenues of trauma, resilience, and self-care. And we have a few weeks throughout that program dedicated specifically to executive dysfunction. We talk about trauma within the context of criminal behavior, special needs populations, mental health, the impact it not only has on the client, but families and professionals.
I cannot endorse it enough. Dr. Jerrod Brown from Concordia University. Some of you may also recognize Jerrod from the great work he does with APHIS, the American Institute for the Advancement of Forensic Studies. Jerrod, until your next visit, we can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Joe. And you might want to tell your audience about our Albert Fish training coming up, too.
Yes.
That you were part of, actually.
Go ahead and plug away while we're at it, Jerrod. Why not?
Yeah, Joe and I, we did a podcast a while back, and we did a behavioral case analysis of the infamous serial killer Albert Fish, and we actually put it into a 3-hour training we're going to be doing the end of July, really doing a neurobiopsychosocial case analysis of Albert Fish and just learning about his history, but then using current empirical-based research and the R&R model and how we could use and learn about this person's extreme history and then what the research says and maybe help make better decisions working with other high-risk types of offender populations.
Thanks for that reminder, Jerrod. And yeah, go back and listen to that great episode we did profiling infamous serial killer Albert Fish. Jerrod, until next time, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure having my dear friend, Dr. Jerrod Brown, on the program. I will leave his contact information as well as other useful related links in the show notes of this episode, including a link entitled Become a Supporter. Simply click on that link to learn details of how you may show support for the Criminologist podcast. Simply a way for you to show your appreciation for the show and help offset some of our overhead cost. Back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to core correctional skills, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on Twitter at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. Go ahead and give us a follow. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Lastly, if you've not already done so, please check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this program. Merchandise is available. Reach out if you are interested. And if you believe what we're doing on the show, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
100% of people working in the criminal justice system, regardless if you are a forensic interviewer, a probation officer, a judge, a corrections officer, police officer, if you understood executive function at a deep level, you would absolutely better understand why people do the things they do. Because again, executive functions related to time management, planning, organization, reasoning, decision-making, self-control.
Again, I like this scenario in that I feel it's one many of us can relate to.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist Channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.